Good afternoon. This is Michael Sanders, and our broadcast is coming to you from the auditorium at Canterbury Woods in Pacific Grove. Some of you are watching it on Zoom. Some of you may be watching it in delayed time on YouTube, and some of you may be experiencing it on our new television station. That's still very much a work in progress, and so you might want to have as a backup the Zoom broadcast in case you need to shift over to that. Today, I'm going to play two of the major works in the piano repertory. There are lots and lots of piano pieces written for children. Some of them are wonderful, some of them are really dreadful. I think there are only a few pieces that are written about children, and that's what I'd like to do today. The first work I'm going to play is the suite of 6 piano pieces by Claude Debussy called The Children's Corner. The Children's Corner. Debussy wrote them for, or at least dedicated them to, his daughter. She was 3 at the time, and her name was Shushu. The dedication says, to my dear little Shushu, with the tender apologies of her father for what is about to follow. The first piece in this set of 6 is called Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum. Now, as you might guess, Gradus ad Parnassum is Latin, and it means steps to Parnassus. Parnassus, of course, is the mountaintop in Greek mythology where the gods live. So, during the 19th century, a number of pianists wrote collections of progressively more difficult piano pieces, exercises, and called them Gradus ad Parnassum. The implication is that a child might think that that title is the name of a person, Gradus ad Parnassum. So I'm not sure what a 3-year-old knows about piano technique or what she might have been interested in, but the piece is charming because it is an imaginative transformation of what would be, with another composer, dry piano patterns into something quite magical. So here is Dr. Gradus ad Parnassum. The second work in this set is called Jimbo's Lullaby. Now, when Debussy was just a boy, there was an elephant in the public zoo in Paris, the Jardin des Plantes, that was named Jumbo. He came from French Sudan, I believe. I don't know whether Debussy remembered the name differently, or this was part of the French dialect, or maybe just a family joke. But the work is called Jimbo's Lullaby, or perhaps in the French pronunciation, Jambo's Lullaby. Debussy marks the score soft and a little bit clumsy. Soft and a little bit clumsy. So here's Jimbo's Lullaby. The next work in the set is called Serenade for a Doll. The doll in question was a porcelain doll, and Debussy seems to have picked up that idea by creating a kind of exotic sound with Chinese scales and perhaps Chinese plucked instruments. The pianist is instructed to play the whole piece with the soft pedal down, even in the portions that are themselves loud. So that produces a special exotic sound of unusual plucked instruments. So here is the Serenade for the Doll, number 3 from the Children's Corner Suite. The next movement is The Snow is Dancing. This is perhaps the most forward-looking of all the pieces in the set. It sounds most like the late Debussy to me. It's also the most technically challenging. So here is The Snow is Dancing. The next movement is the little shepherd. The little shepherd. We find the shepherd in a field with his flute and probably some sheep. He plays 3 little solos, and then there's a kind of commentary on each of them, I suppose, perhaps from the sheep. Here is the little shepherd. And finally, the last of the children's corner pieces. This is the Gollywog's Cakewalk. Now, a Gollywog is a doll that came from America. It's a black doll with red pants and a red bow tie and wild hair. It's based on a popular novel by a woman writer of the time. The cakewalk, as you may well know, is a kind of competitive dance where people dance their very best steps, and the one who wins receives as a prize a cake. That's where we get our expression, "it takes the cake." In all the fun of this piece, somehow a bit of the prelude to Tristan und Isolde of Wagner creeps in. Once again, we're left wondering what little Shushu might have had to say about Tristan und Isolde. But here is the last of the 6 movements of the Children's Corner Suite, the movement that's called Gollywog's Cakewalk. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the other work that I would like to play this afternoon is by Robert Schumann, and he called it Scenes from Childhood, Kinderszenen. He originally wrote 30 pieces. He described them in a letter to his wife, Clara, as 30 droll little pieces. He eventually kept 13 of the 30 pieces. One of the last steps in composing the pieces was to put names to them. I think at this time in Schumann's life, he was investigating the question, how profound can a short piano piece be? And the complement to that, how short can a profound piano piece be? This is like a small book of poems in the sense that they're individual works, but they've been carefully arranged. They don't have a sequence in terms of chronology. It doesn't, for example, go from morning to night, or perhaps from childhood to adulthood, something like that. But the pieces are definitely organized so that one key leads into another or contrasts with another. There are some thematic connections. It's definitely woven as a single large piece in 13 sections. Because of that, I won't interrupt playing the whole sequence with comments on all the individual pieces. But I would like to say just a word or two about three of the pieces. The middle piece, the seventh piece, is called Träumerei, which is the German, it's sometimes translated as dreaming or even as reveries, dreaming or reveries. To me, it's a piece of great happiness, but as a sign of how different people hear things in different ways. In Russia, it's called the morning music, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, the morning music. And it's sung as a wordless chorus on Victory Day in Russia to commemorate the deaths of those people who have died for the fatherland. This is probably the best known of all the pieces in this set, probably the best known piece of Schumann, a piano piece. And it leads into another piece called By the Fireside. It has the same key, it has the same beginning of the melody. It's just one more sign of how this is all intricately woven together. The other two pieces I'd like to talk about are the next to the last, which I think is the greatest of all of them. It's called Child Falling Asleep. Child Falling Asleep. It's simply a miraculously wonderful piece. And then the very last piece is called The Poet Speaks. Now, this last work begins as if it was a hymn or perhaps a benediction. We hear 2 lines or so of the hymn, and then there's a free section, which is, of course, the poet speaking. We suddenly realize that all the music we've heard up to then has been seen through the eyes of a man who now wants to speak to us. Man could perhaps be the father of the child, or the man could be looking back at his own childhood and seeing himself in these different scenes. So then there's this free section. The poet speaks. What does he say? Well, I think that's beyond the power of language to say. Only music can say what that passage is. Then the hymn resumes again and then fades away to silence. So here are the 13 movements of the Scenes of Childhood by Robert Schumann. The first 3 movements are Of Foreign Lands and People, A Curious Story, and Catch Me. Of Foreign Lands and People, A Curious Story, and Catch Me. The next three pieces are pleading child, perfect happiness, and an important event. Pleading child, perfect happiness, an important event. The next two pieces are dreaming and at the fireside. The next three pieces are The Knight of the Hobby Horse, Knight, The Knight of the Hobby Horse, Almost Too Serious, and Frightening. The Knight of the Hobby Horse, Almost Too Serious, and Frightening. Finally, the last two movements of the scenes of childhood. First is the child falling asleep, and the very last is the poet speaks. The child falling asleep, and then the poet speaks. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I want to thank Keith and Jovan for their technical help. As you know, tomorrow is Halloween, and all of you will be celebrating in different ways. My wife got it in her head that she would celebrate a 70th birthday tomorrow, and the rest of you will have your own ways of doing it. I have a little Halloween piece for you. If you remember the Peanuts cartoons, you remember Linus was a great believer in the great pumpkin. If you were a very good child all year long, and you truly believed in the great pumpkin, and you went to a pumpkin patch, it had to be a sincere pumpkin patch. But if you went to a pumpkin patch that was sincere, then perhaps the great pumpkin would appear to you and shower you with gifts. Well, this was one of the stories that became a television special back in the 60s. And the music that Vince Guaraldi wrote for that show included this great piece. This is the Great Pumpkin Waltz, the Great Pumpkin Waltz of Vince Guaraldi.